Okay, it's 5 o'clock now, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to our Be Prepared Davenport Flood Risk Reduction Series. Today's topic is the second in our series and will cover low entry point elevations. Where does this data come from and what does it mean? Today's session is being recorded and will be available on the city's website and social media. Today's presenters are Laura Berkeley, Development and Planning Administrator with Development and Neighborhood Services, and Robin Dunn, Communication and Preparedness Manager with Public Works. I am your facilitator, Megan Overton, Neighborhood Development Coordinator with Community and Economic Development. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the chat feature and we will answer them at the end. You can also contact us at any time by emailing flood@davenportiowa.com. Additionally, we have included some of the links and resources that we will be discussing in the chat. Now I'm going to turn it over to Robin.
Thank you, Megan. So low entry point data. Residents in the 24-foot riverfront floodplain recently received a postcard in the mail with an introduction of this education series. Some of those postcards included information about the low entry point elevation information for their property. That data was collected as part of not only the current flood study that Davenport has going on, but as part of a project that the Corps of Engineers Silver Jackets program is doing for us. With that low entry point data, they're conducting something called HAZUS mapping, which really looks at economic and property analysis based on varying degrees of river level. And they're going to look at that information and propose some possible solutions at a variety of river levels. And again, that information is really a component of and concurrent to the current flood study that we have being conducted. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. The important thing to know about low entry point data is it is the low entry point when surface water has the potential to enter a property. It does not account for seepage into a building or sewer backup or anything like that. With the low entry point data, we felt like it was important to share that with property owners. It does not qualify, unfortunately, as a flood elevation certificate, but it should give people a really good idea as you learn some of the information from Laura, whether you should consider seeking an actual flood survey and elevation certificate. You might have the opportunity to be removed from the floodplain and then therefore you don't have to carry flood insurance, or there will be some flood insurance changes or reductions for you. On the opposite side of it, it will give you some really good information about some mitigation types of activities that you might conduct at that property. So again, doesn't qualify as a flood elevation certificate, but is a really good information to have that you can kind of do some of that decision making, which way do you go? That entry point or when that surface water comes into a property does not account for flood defense systems, as flood defense systems are not 100% or foolproof. And you can find information on that current flood study at davenportiowa.com/flood study. We are looking to probably have the second round of public input on some proposals for mitigation activities along Davenport's riverfront, probably around mid-April of 2020. So I'm going to hand it over to Laura. She's going to dig into the firm and what this data or what your numbers actually mean to you.
Thank you, Robin. So if you attended our flood insurance rate map session last week, we kind of went over some of this information. So the official flood insurance rate map are designated by FEMA and adopted by the city, and they indicate levels of flood risk. So the blue area is what's called the 1% annual chance flood area, or often referred to as a 100-year flood. And then the orange area is the 0.2% annual chance or 500-year flood area. So in the flood insurance rate maps, there are some elevations related to the base flood elevation with the 1% annual chance, and I can kind of show you how to find those and then what those actually mean. To reiterate what Robin said, when we're talking about flooding, we're talking about surface water. We're not talking about seepage in basements or sewer backup. So we're looking at overland flow of water. So those low entry points are the lowest part of your property where that surface water will come in. So I'm going to show you, this might look familiar to you. This was also in our first series. So we have a starred property here, and then the nearest, what we call a cross-section, this is cross-section H on the Mississippi River, there is a number. In this case, it's 564.2 feet. That is the base flood elevation at this particular spot on the Mississippi River. So as you can see, it's not, they're only in intervals along a creek or a river. But you can contact us at any time and we can help you estimate what that number would be for your specific property. And then also keep in mind that areas that are outside the floodplain still have the ability to flood. It doesn't mean they won't. It just means that we've identified higher risk levels of flooding within the mapped floodplain. On your right here are the annual exceedance probabilities by river stage at Lock and Dam 15. So when we commonly refer to a 100-year flood, again, that's a 1% annual chance of a flood. That equates to a 23.6-foot flood stage. For reference, the 2019 flood was a 22.7 flood stage, so we haven't quite reached that 100-year flood level on the Mississippi River yet. I'm going to take you to the FEMA Map Service Center. The link is in the chat. So we have the Ground Transportation Center here for you, and here on this right here. And once again, you can download your own ferment by clicking on this button after you enter your address. And this is what will come up. So as you can see right here, across section I, we have 464.9 feet. Okay. So what does that number actually mean? Well, that is the height of water at a 1% annual chance flood. So you have to kind of do a little bit of math on what the elevation is for the real ground versus how high above that base flood elevation the property is or is not. So there's a really cool tool that the Iowa Flood Center has pulled together, and it's flood risk map. It's available for the Mississippi River floodplain and then select areas on creeks. And the link's in the chat for you. So we're going to take a look at the Ground Transportation Center so you can see a closer look at it. So as you can see, there are different there's colors here. And if you look on the bottom left, there is a little legend, and they have ranges of depth related for each color. So I had selected the 1% annual chance or 100-year flood for this location. So as you can see, the pale yellow is 0 to half a foot of water, and then the darker yellow is half a foot to 1 foot of water, and so on. Now you can also on this map select any level of annual chance flood. So if you want to see what a 200-year flood would look like, there you go. And if you want to see what a 500-year flood would look like, there you go. Also, at this current time, the maps actually show some of the flooding that happened on the Mississippi River in 2019. So if you kind of want to see how that relates to where things were at the time, I believe this was sometime in April when this aerial was taken. In addition, under the flood risk gradients, if you click that box, you can see the different gradients of risk. So once again, the legend is located in the bottom left. You start with the red level, and really the 50% probability is basically within the Mississippi banks. And then it goes from yellows to greens to blues. So the 2% annual probability is this green, and then there's like a teal color that represents the 100-year, and then a slightly bluer 200, and then the darker blue is the 500-year. So what this depth grid is showing you is that difference in height between the base flood elevation and the ground. If you don't have this tool available for you, say you're on a creek, you can do the math on your own to have an idea of what that depth is. And that information is helpful because you can determine from that how much damage you might have to your property. So in relation to the, this would be what the postcard looked like when it came in the mail. And the low entry point for elevation data here says 566.59. So if you go back to the flood insurance rate map, we have 564.9. So really, this isn't the lowest entry point is actually above the base flood elevation. So it's great for the ground transportation center. In some cases, the number will be less, and that's when so if this is a number less than the 564.9, say it's 562.9, that means you're 2 feet of water when you're at a base flood elevation. So that's how you work that. I understand that it's something kind of complicated, so we are happy to walk through that with you. If you have any questions, you can email us or you can call us, and we will get that information to you. So the flood insurance rate maps are important when you're considering investing in your property. So there are some federal, state, and local rules that come into play when you're developing in a floodplain, and we can help you through explaining what those are. But if you're planning on putting a lot of work into your home, FEMA wants you to protect your property. And so at some level, then you will need to bring your structure out of the floodplain or protect it. Even if you aren't required by code to do that, you might be able to do some things to your home or your business to help reduce flood risk or prepare flood defense. And then, as Robin had mentioned, if those numbers are higher than what the base flood elevation is and your property, according to the firm, is in, you might be a good candidate to request to be removed from the floodplain. That's called a letter of map amendment. A surveyor is needed to help you through that. You can call us and we can get you pointed in the right direction with that. Also, feel free to contact us at any time. We can look up any kind of information we might have on your property, whether that is already an elevation certificate that's been filed, or if there has been a letter of map amendment already granted by FEMA. If you attended the flood series last week, we didn't let you know that March 23rd, 2021, we will have new effective flood maps. We have adopted them at the city level. In addition to that, we did clean up some other pieces of the code. We made it clear that smaller projects like new carpet or tile or paint does not require a flood permit unless it's part of a larger project. And then the code aligns with the state and FEMA requirements. And we can also look up any past floodplain permits that have been issued for your property, in addition to if there's a LOMA or an elevation certificate.
Laura, there is a couple questions regarding kind of the code and stuff. Do you want to go over those now, or do you want us to go over them at the end?
We can go over them now. We're pretty much done.
All right. So, let's go back a slide or two. And the first one is, can you explain what base flood elevation means?
Sure. Base flood elevation is the height of the flood at a 1% annual chance flood, often called a 100-year flood. So that's the height of the water during that flood event.
Okay, and then the next one is, can you give us the code number for the Davenport flood ordinance?
So the Davenport code ordinance is in chapter 15.44. And the newest changes probably are posted at the very top of that section, but not incorporated in by our e-code management system yet. So if you want to see those changes, make sure you look towards the top when you click on that section.
Okay, that's all the questions we have for now, if you want to go back to the slide 11. Okay, that is going to conclude our session for today. Please join us for the next series, Flood Insurance, Why It's Important, Lowering Premiums, and How the City's Participation in the CRS program helps keep rates down. This session will be held Tuesday, March 30th at 2 p.m. and on Thursday, April 1st at 5 p.m. And then if there's any other questions, feel free to ask them now. Additionally, if you have questions at a later time, or if you'd like more information about that flood ordinance, you can email flood@davenportiowa.com and we'll get back to you. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and please be sure to visit beprepareddavenport.com for more flood resources, including updates for public review and input on the flood studies Robin mentioned earlier, and to view recordings of our flood risk reduction series. We can leave the chat open for a few minutes in case there's further questions.